Hello, and welcome to It's Your Time to Shine, a story about being a mom in a modern world. Before we pontificate what it means to raise kids today in a rapidly changing world, let's start with a quick introduction. My name is Juspreet Kaur. I'm a mother of 3. I work full-time, which has its added complexities, and maybe I should call it an additional consideration. My oldest daughter is 13, my son is 11, and my youngest daughter is 8. We are figuring motherhood and childhood out as we go, and with me is one of my dear friends, Lisa Vora. Hey Lisa, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hey Jess, I'm so excited to be here.
Awesome.
All right, let me tell you a little bit about me. My name's Lisa Vora. I have one daughter. She's 3 1/4. She'll be 3 1/2 pretty soon. And I'm a stay-at-home mom. Happened when Alyssa was about 9 months old. And she's in preschool right now, and she pretty much acts like a typical 3-year-old. She got the memo.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to discuss with you. Being a mom, a stay-at-home mom or a working mom, and having kids of different ages, there's so many phases that you go through and so many things that we kind of have to learn and we have to experiment with and explore. And I've been thinking about this a lot, and I kind of think about it on a couple of different frameworks. Like you mentioned that you started staying home when your daughter was a little bit older. And then I did something similar. I actually really admire the way that you made the decision to stay home. I came about it in a different way, but that like intentionality to say, this isn't working for my family, or I want something more and I'm going to choose to make these certain decisions. I think that can really be like a strategic gift.
Well, making a whole documentary on that.
Yeah, that's right. So I think that would be really interesting for you to share your perspective on what it's like being a filmmaker and really looking at things through a different lens, because you literally do that on a daily basis. One of the things, like moms, we're all doing different things, but everything that we do, every decision we make comes with our perspective, our experiences, and that can really be different depending on our cultures and our different upbringings. So being a Punjabi, being a Sikh, living in America, for me, there are so many things that my parents did and my grandparents did when they were raising their kids that just doesn't translate. It's not doable. They're in different situations and my kids are in different situations. And so because we can't really reach out to our parents or siblings, I thought it would be awesome for you and I to share some of our perspective and just share it for the world.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, we all come from different places and we're different people too. So every perspective matters, makes a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when I have asked for help or asked for advice, I always take a look at it and say, okay, will this work for my child's personality? Will this work for what's going on in our lives at this time, in our house for this time, even what's happening in the world, right? Because there's like an added layer of context from the changing nature of society and cultural norms.
I would think it was a lot harder though for you because how old is Bhavneet now?
She's 13.
Yeah, so 13 years ago, you didn't have the resources that I have right now. Blogs, the internet. I'm like really lucky where I am because I have you, first of all. So I just come to you for all the advice. But also I think I have way more resources. I mean, you know, I try to follow my gut. I mean, I really do. For most parenting decisions, I actually do. I do this thing called keeping it real parenting and follow your gut parenting. That's just my motto.
That's awesome. That would have been a great like podcast title, Keeping It Real Parenting.
Yeah, but I do supplement. So I supplement with blog posts if I really need some sort of insight, or obviously asking my friends, my peers, my parents. But I kind of feel like with you didn't really have all those resources. So what did you do 12, 13 years ago when you were the first amongst all of your friends?
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't have the same resources from a technology standpoint, which things have just exponentially grown, and it's pretty awesome that there's so many resources out there. But I also lacked the wisdom of reaching out to others and asking for help. Like I really thought I had to know what to do. I really thought that because no one talks about parenting, no one talks about the challenges with nursing or the challenges with sleeping or co-sleeping and sleep training, I really thought that people just figure it out and just have this natural intuition and instinct that would guide them. And
Right.
one thing that I will say is like, I was one of the first ones to get married. I was one of the first ones in my circle of friends that had a baby. And so because I didn't have a lot of people to turn to, I basically was always lost and confused, but just really didn't share it with anyone.
You know, you bring up a good point, though. It makes me wonder, not back in the day like you're so old, but do you kind of feel sometimes when you have too many resources, you don't think for yourself as much? Like, you relied on your intuition and your gut back then, and you did just fine. Do you sometimes think that it might be a little too much, or like the pros and cons of where we are today?
I think that it could be confusing. I think I am a person with so many choices. I don't always thrive when I have so many choices. Like, I'm good with 3 or 4 choices. I'm terrible with like 31 choices. Like, when I go into Baskin Robbins and someone says, what flavor of ice cream do you want? I pretty much get the same thing every single time.
Yeah, if you know you like it, why mess with it?
Yeah, exactly. But I think that there is something to be said about having that community and being able to share and feeling safe enough to talk about things that you don't understand, so that you can cultivate that intuition. You can cultivate your instincts a little bit.
I guess less isolation, especially for a stay-at-home mom.
Oh, totally. I mean, that's like a podcast topic in and of itself. I will say, like, one thing that I think I had the benefit when you're the first one out of the gate, I made decisions without having anyone judge me or look at me and say, oh, you should have done what I did in this situation. But there are pros and cons to that, right? Because when you have a support network, you do gain insight.
Right.
But there is another side of being in a community and having a network that's like maybe guilt or worrying about what other people will say and how others will react. And that is for the two of us both being Punjabi. I mean, we've both seen that in the Punjabi community. There is a lot of what will so-and-so think, or how will they compare how I'm making decisions with how someone else is making decisions. I was talking to our friend Manish. He's a digital futurist, and he had reminded me how individual perspectives could really be important, and how someone like me or someone like you that has a bunch of different cultural layers to us, such as growing up in America, having parents that are immigrants, the perspective could be interesting. And so he was like, you need to share some of your insights and your experiences with others and create that community of support. So I was really excited, and I was basically thinking like, okay, let's do this. Let's figure out how to make this happen.
That's a great idea, especially for our kids. I mean, for them to listen to our insight and what we went through and our challenges. And they can teach us more than anyone, right? I mean, what happened with Hargun again?
One day, I guess it was about 2 weeks ago, I came downstairs to my kitchen, and I was kind of like leaning on my husband. I was kind of like slumped over on the counter, and I said to him like, oh man, how am I going to do this? And my 8-year-old gets up from the table, and I didn't realize that she could hear me at that point. So she walks across the room and she holds my face, and she's like, why are you scared, Mama? You'll figure it out. What's wrong? And so in that moment, I started to straighten up, and I was actually starting to like put on a happy face, about to tell her like, no, it's fine. Don't worry about it. I've got it under control, when I stopped myself. And I thought to myself, you know what? I don't have to put on a happy face. I can let her see that I want to do something and I'm not sure how to do it, and I'm overwhelmed right now, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to do my research and figure it out. And in that moment, I kind of felt like this is an opportunity to show my children, and in a way, show everyone that it's not easy, but it's okay. We can do hard things.
Oh, I 100% agree. I already see how different my mom and I are, from different cultures, different generations. But you were just saying about what will someone think. My mom used to think about stuff about us that way, like what will my kids think of me? Does that make sense to you?
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And that's something I wouldn't think twice about. But I'll share a story. When I first dropped Alyssa off at preschool, it was just a really tough day. I mean, they had to yank her away from me. She wasn't used to it. This is when she's like a little younger than 3. And I'm like bawling. And so I got in the car and I drive away with Samir. And my mom asked me, did Alyssa see you cry? And I'm like, well, of course she saw me cry. I always show her my emotions. I think it's important to show vulnerability. And my mom's like, oh, wow, that's funny, because when I dropped, it was really hard for me when I dropped you off preschool, you and your sister, actually, because she was first at preschool. And I was strong for you guys, but as soon as I walked away, I started crying. So I thought it was just interesting how differently we parent already. And obviously there's some personality too. My mom's a different personality, but just the whole keeping it real and showing vulnerability, that in itself, we're just so different.
Oh, totally. I think the idea of like gender roles and parents being always in control and knowing what to do, like that defined the era that we were raised in. That like really defined our mothers, and to a certain degree our fathers too, right? And so like having a kid later, it definitely changes the way that you parent. But I think to the outside influences and what we consider socially acceptable, if socially acceptable is still like a term, and what you're describing, like showing your child your vulnerability and showing your emotion, we know now that it's good for them to see that. And our parents were raised in a time where they didn't know that, right? And they were worried, like maybe this is going to make them weak. Maybe this will make them cry more, that kind of thing.
And you can't blame them either, because when we start to look at today's parenting compared to, 20 years ago, you just can't sit there and say, well, you should have known better, because it was just a different time, different research. Like you just said, we didn't know that it's a good thing. Back then, it just seemed like a sign of weakness, so we're not going to do it.
Exactly. And then you take something like dropping your child off at preschool. When you're a stay-at-home mom, it has a different meaning than when you are a working mom. And I will say, like, for me, it depends on your child too and what they're going through. Like,
I was about to say that depends on the child too.
Totally. Like for me, my experience dropping off my firstborn not preschool. She actually went straight to kindergarten because she was my oldest of three, and my kids were so close in age that I just started, I stayed home when I had my son. And so I ended up just keeping them all home with me and saying like, oh, well, I'm home, so I'll keep them all with me. So I dropped her off at kindergarten, and she ran into the school and didn't even look back. She didn't wave or anything. And I cried. And I was like, oh my gosh, she doesn't need me anymore. But really what was happening is like she had been with me for 5 years of her life, been with her brother and sister. And she wanted to see other people and make other friends and see what else is happening in the world.
How dare she?
I know. And the funny thing is that here I was, I still remember I had my kids, my younger ones, in a double stroller, and I'm walking back to the parking lot, and there was another mom that I had become friends with that lived in our neighborhood, and she was like, what's wrong? And I just had tears streaming down my face, and I was like, oh, Pavneet went inside. She didn't even wave. Like, I stood there to see if maybe she would look back at me and wave, and she didn't. She just like ran into the line and was like waving at other kids and things like that, and she was like, that's good, like she's going into kindergarten and she's not crying, like she doesn't have separation anxiety, and this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, she's secure.
Yes, and she's secure. And I was like, what about me? Like, why doesn't she need me?
They test your security at that point. Like, yeah, my kid's secure, but I'm obviously not secure enough to handle that.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's so funny because seriously, in that situation, I had a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I had a 1-year-old that was like learning to walk, and I had a 3-year-old who was going through the like, I want to do everything on my own. Like, the Punjabi word for doing things by yourself is appe, and my son all day long, appe, 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 appe. That's all he would say. He wanted to do everything on his own, and he couldn't do things on his own. So rather than looking and embracing that moment when my daughter went to kindergarten, I was just focused on the wrong thing.
Then I still focus on the wrong thing because I'm not embracing it, because it's happening right now.
It's happening to you right now.
Especially the potty. Like, I understand she wants to go potty by herself, and now she wants to close the door by herself, and she wants me just not in the bathroom. But this has to be supervised.
Right. Some things need to be supervised.
And I'm like, did you wipe? Yeah, I wiped. I'm like, how do I know you wiped? I don't know if you did wipe. Did you wash your hands? I washed my hands. I'm like, no, you didn't. I assume she didn't, because I'm not taking a chance with washing hands. Anyway, so continue.
No, but it's like true. It's like every few years what you're focused on and what is important to us, and our perspective will keep on changing. And so getting back to the podcast, I kind of thought like, it would be cool to share some different perspectives, to create a little bit of that community and that support network, and just start talking about things that we don't talk about. And
Yeah.
there are plenty of blogs out there, and there's plenty of like parenting.com, and there's lots of resources on
An award-winning documentary that's coming out in 2018.
Yes, exactly. But there are a lot of things for like mainstream America, but the truth is, like, it's different when you're Punjabi. It's different when you come from like South Asian ancestry, and we have that ethnicity, and our family values are different, and our decision making is different.
Right.
And so I just thought it would be good to talk about some of those things.
Yeah, and we're also even further away because, with our kids, okay, we're one generation, but with our parents, we're pretty much 2 to 3 generations away because of moving to a completely different country.
Yeah, totally. And I think, like, truthfully, the way that we parent and the way that we raise our children is probably changing like every 10 years, right? Things, if you go back 10 years ago,
every 10 seconds sometimes.
Yeah, phones just started, and no, but you know what I mean? But I think like there's a huge difference between how we will raise our children, how our parents raised us. And I love my parents and I love my in-laws, and I think they did a great job, but I just don't think their methods would work today.
Definitely, and it wouldn't. And our methods won't work on when our children have children. It's just you've got to go with where we are too, with the times.
Yeah, totally. You know what might be interesting would be like to have our moms join us for a podcast, and then we could have them like kind of talk about what their immigrant experience was like.
Oh yeah, we should definitely do that.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun.
Yeah, no, we should definitely get both of them on. It'll be great to have both perspectives. Well, your mom came to America, right? When she was how old?
She was probably like 20 or 22, I want to say.
God, I can't even imagine. Mm-hmm. So, and her English was also very, how was her English?
Well, she didn't know English when she came here.
Oh,
she
not
came
at
to
all.
America and then learned English. Yeah.
Oh, I did not know that. We definitely should talk about that.
Yeah, so just imagine being in a different country. They just have totally different perspective. And so I think like this is, it could be the start of a conversation.
Definitely.
So getting back to this podcast and kind of wrapping up this first episode, we've talked over the years about how coincidences, like, are they really coincidences, or maybe the universe is trying to present something to us? And I really believe if we're looking for signs, we end up seeing them. So I saw something on Facebook today, and I thought I'd share it. It kind of spoke to me. One of my friends from high school posted this, and it said, "It's much easier to oppose than support. It's much easier to destroy than to build. It's much easier to blame than to accept responsibility." And so those 3 statements are kind of like 3 anchors. Like, this is an opportunity for us to come together, maybe have some of our friends and family weigh in, give us advice, and just talk about how we can support each other, how we can build each other up, and we can support other moms and dads or other caregivers, and just accept responsibility for the little people in our lives that we hope to raise, and the ones that are adjacent to us, right? Friends, children, and other children in our community that we want to have a positive impact on.
Well said. I think taking responsibility for your actions is what makes a good human being. There are like a bazillion ways, but really just staying true to yourself and just doing a self-scan every day and just thinking about where you need to improve. I think that's just important as human beings, to take responsibility for our actions and just seeing where we erred so that we can improve upon ourselves. And that's going to help in parenting.
I totally agree. And I'm thinking about something you said a couple weeks ago when we were at the park. You had mentioned like the political climate being what it is and how it's changed. Discourse is coming back. Like, public discourse had gone away for a few years. Like, people really weren't talking about things. People weren't getting involved. They weren't thinking about how things affect other things and how those things affect us and impact our lives.
Right.
And so if we can raise people to not be jerks, that's already progress. Like, that's huge. But if we can go a little bit further, go a little deeper, then we could really help one another, and it seems like a pretty good place to be in.
Yeah, definitely. And we are definitely way more engaged today than we were just not even a year ago. So
totally,
to have that conversation is important. And like you said, everything changes. I would say for me, definitely, and I won't get too political, but just our political climate and what's happening is changing the way I am parenting, because I realize how important it is for my child to understand the world outside of herself, really understand the world, understand what it means to be in a free country. And that kind of perspective isn't easy to teach, but I think because we're engaging more these days and talking about it, we're more likely to raise kids more socially aware.
Totally. And I think so beautifully said by you, and such a like great goal to have in terms of like from a parenting perspective. Truly, so many years I lived as a mom, like waiting for some moment. Like, I don't know what I was waiting for. I just constantly had that, like, but when XYZ thing happens, then I'll be happy.
Right.
Then I'll be ready. Then I'll be comfortable. And part of the reason for the podcast to be named what it is, and you know, we discuss this a little bit, is like, this is it. This is a time for you, for me, for our parents, for all the moms out there or the dads out there. Like, this is your time to shine. There's no waiting for a moment in the future. This is it. Like, whatever we're going to do for our kids, we got to do it right now.
Exactly. To be in the here and now and to live in the here and now. Yep.
I am really looking forward to doing more of these with you.
Yeah, no, me too. You're very persistent, which is good. I needed that.
Okay. It doesn't sound like you're convinced yet, but that's okay.
I did. I needed that. I told Samir, I was like, she's like, let's do it next week. No. She wants to do it next week. I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I'm like, you know, I said storyboard. And then I was like, most people just talk. And they're like, yeah, we'll do it. And I'm like, and you know it's never going to happen. And she's like, okay, forget the story, but let's just do it. And I was just telling him, like, I like that. I'm like, I need that. I need that kick.
Okay, well, remember
thanks.
that, because there will be times in the future where I'll need a kick in the future too. So with that, let's wrap this up for our first episode of It's Your Time to Shine.
Okay.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everyone who's been listening.
All right. Thank you, Jess.
And join us when we talk about more adventures about being a mom in a modern world. Thanks for listening.